Daniel Sports Central, Big Over College football game preview and prediction on the Week 10 matchup between the Oregon State Beavers and the Washington Huskies. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 10. You got Oregon State, who is ranked 23rd in the initial college football playoff rankings, and they're 6-2 on the season, facing off against Washington, who's in a similar situation. The Huskies are 6-2 on the season, 3-2 in conference. Both teams are right in the middle of the Pac-12. So a crucial game for both these teams coming up here in Week 10. We'll be over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting with your team trends. Oregon State beat Colorado 42-9 was the final score there. And once again, they're 6-2 on the season. Both teams are already bowl eligible heading into November. And both teams are also coming off of winning streaks. Oregon State has won 3 straight heading into this matchup. And something to keep in mind as well is that both teams are coming off of byes. So both teams are going to be rested up and definitely have time to prepare for this matchup. And the Huskies on the other side beat Cal on the road 28-21 in their last game. They're also 6-2 on the season and coming off of 2 straight wins. Games will be on Friday, November 4th in Seattle, Washington. So the Huskies are the home team for this one. And your kickoff is 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. So it's a Friday night game in Seattle. And this is going to be, probably one of the best matchups in the Pac-12 this weekend, if not the best. You got 2 teams that are 6-2, winning records. 2 teams that you could say are in the top half of the conference, so definitely a good opportunity for both these teams here. Washington is favored by 3.5. Over-under is 54.5, and the FBI is going with the Huskies here, 61%. Series history, Washington leads at 67-35. Oregon State won the last matchup, but Washington has won 4 out of the past 5. So the Huskies are, they've had more success in overall history, but also recent history. Meanwhile, Oregon State won the last matchup. Stat comparison, Oregon State is 67th in points per game this season, 20th in points allowed. They're 90th in pass yards game, 27th in rush yards. And then for yards allowed, they're 86th in passing, 16th in rushing. And as for Washington, they're 10th in points per game, 85th in points allowed. They're first in pass yards game. This is the best passing offense in the country here in Washington. And they are 103rd in rush yards a game. And then for yards allowed, they're 115th in passing, 17th in rushing. So the takeaway is that Oregon State is a solid team on defense, that's for sure, as they are in the top 30 in points allowed. They're only allowing like 22 points a game, and then they got a really strong rush defense, 16th in the country there, and they also have got a good backfield, a strong backfield, as they're 27th in the rushing game this season, averaging right around 200 yards of rushing a game. And as for Washington, this team is strong offensively. So kind of the opposite is Oregon State, even though Oregon State is still decent on the offensive side of the ball. And so they're in the top 10 there. They are 85th in points allowed, which is below 500. That's in the bottom half of the FBS. But once again, this team is first in pass yards game. This is the best passing offense statistically in the country here. Obviously, you got Michael Penix, who has passed for nearly 3,000 yards this season with 22 touchdowns and 4 picks. Michael Penix back at Indiana, we saw his potential in the early parts of his career. He just never really reached his full potential. And so, transferring to Washington, there was some hope for Michael Penix, and having a different team, a new start has been a great thing for him, that's for sure, as he's had a very impressive season to this point, already passing for 3,000 yards through 8 games. This season is only two-thirds of the way through, and Michael Penix is already knocking on the door of 3,000 pass yards. Recent matchups, Oregon State beat Colorado 42-9. They beat Washington State 24-10, which Washington State is not a bad team this season, so you could consider that to be a pretty good win there for the Beavers. They also beat Stanford 28-27. Lost to Utah 16-42, and they lost to USC 14-17, so they were really competitive against a good USC team the next week. Going on the road to Utah, got blown out there, but this team otherwise has been pretty impressive this season, especially in the past few weeks, as this team hasn't lost a game since the 1st of October. And as for Washington, they beat Cal on the road 20-21, beat Arizona by 10, 49-39, lost to Arizona State 38-45, lost to UCLA as well 32-40. UCLA is now ranked in the top 15, and it turns out the Bruins are one of the best teams in the conference, and that game was, UCLA led the game for a long time, even though Washington kind of crept back into it towards the end. Obviously, that brutal loss against Arizona State, that's one to keep in mind, as they lost that game by a touchdown, and they beat Stanford back in late September 40-22. Your key points for this one, both teams are 6-2. Oregon State has had success in the rushing game this season. That's the main way that they have success on the offensive side of the ball. Is obviously you got Damian Martinez, who's the lead rusher on this team, over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. Obviously, he's not the only running back on this team that's had an impact. They're overlooked, but this team is a top 5 team in the Pac-12. I mean, if you look at it right now, you got Oregon, you got USC, UCLA, and Utah, definitely the top 4 in the Pac-12. But after that, you got Oregon State and Washington. These two teams are definitely knocking on the door of that top 4. And then you got, obviously, a decent gap, and then Arizona State and the rest of the conference, which, I mean, there are 5 teams in the Pac-12 with only 1 loss in conference right now. So, I mean, there's definitely a distinct gap between Oregon State and Washington, and then the bottom half of the Pac-12. But, I mean, this team is inconsistent defensively in Oregon State, but they are talented. I mean, this is a talented team, and they have really come around the past couple of years. Last year was a good season for this team, and now for this year, they are already bowl eligible and ranked heading into November. And as for Washington, Michael Penix is obviously playing at a high level, the Indiana transfer quarterback. And, I mean, in Indiana, it looked like almost he got burnt out after a while. He just was not playing his best ball, and we knew that he had more potential, and we knew that he could have played better than the way that he was there when he was a Hoosier, but he's definitely found his stride with Washington, and he's been having a great season. In fact, Washington is, once again, the top-ranked team in the country right now in passing yards a game. So this is a strong team offensively in the Huskies, and they have the home field advantage, and this is obviously a crucial game for both these teams. You got 2 teams that are both 6-2 overall, both 3-2 in conference. It's a very even matchup, and the winner of this game is definitely going to be ranked. And obviously, this is an opportunity for both these teams to get a decent win on the resume as we start to look forward to the postseason. And both these teams are still very much capable of getting to a pretty good bowl game come the postseason. With that said, let's get the prediction here for Oregon State and Washington coming up here in Week 10 of action. And I'm going to go with Washington to get the win here. 34-24 is my predicted final score. So I do have Washington actually winning this game by a couple of possessions. I got them winning it by 10. I think the Huskies are going to be a solid team start to finish here. I mean, Oregon State, I really am a believer in the Beavers. I think this is definitely a good team here in Oregon State. But I feel like the Huskies, with Michael Penix in this passing game with the Huskies as well, I feel like for an Oregon State defense that has allowed a lot of yards in the secondary and in the passing game, they're allowing an average of 230 yards a game in that area. It's going to be tough for them to stop this really strong Washington passing game, and Odunze and obviously Michael Penix, who once again he's already got like 3,000 pass yards on the season, and we're only 2/3 of the way through. So this is a strong Washington team in that area, and I feel like they take advantage of that of Oregon State. And so I'll say 55% towards the Huskies. I do expect this to be a closer game. Could go either way for sure. Oregon State's been playing really well in recent weeks. So, I mean, you got to obviously keep that in mind. Over-under is 54.5. I'll take the over for this one. And Washington to cover the spread in the end. With that said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup. And I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.